I am Abigail, 28 years old, and until last month, I thought I knew what family meant. As I straightened my black dress for my grandfather Harold's will reading, I never imagined my world would shatter that day. Grandpa always said I was his favorite, the one who truly understood him. My sister Heather's sudden kindness toward our parents should have warned me. Something felt wrong, but I was too naive to see the betrayal coming. Before I continue the story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. If you have ever felt betrayed by family, hit that like button and subscribe to see how I turn the tables on those who hurt me most. The morning of the will reading dawned gray and somber, matching the mood in our family home. My father Thomas paced the kitchen, checking his watch every few minutes, while my mother Karen fussed over Heather's appearance, smoothing her perfectly styled hair. Nobody asked if I was ready or needed anything. This wasn't unusual, but today the distance felt more pronounced. Our family had always been divided along clear lines. My parents and Heather formed one unit, while Grandpa Harold and I formed another. It wasn't that my parents disliked me exactly, but I had never fit neatly into their vision of what a daughter should be. "Hurry up, Abigail," my father called up the stairs. "We can't be late for this." As I descended the stairs, I caught Heather whispering something to our mother, who nodded with a strange smile. They immediately stopped when they saw me. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," Heather replied too quickly. "Just talking about what to wear to the reception afterward." My relationship with my grandfather had been special from the start. When I was just 6 years old, he began teaching me to play piano on the beautiful grand in his study. While Heather was outside playing with neighborhood kids, I sat beside him on the bench, my small fingers stretching to reach the keys. "You have the soul of an artist and the mind of a judge," he used to tell me. Just like me, Grandpa had been a successful businessman, building Lawson Enterprises from nothing into a company worth hundreds of millions. But his true passion had been justice. He'd wanted to be a lawyer in his youth, but had followed his own father's wishes into business instead. Perhaps that's why he was so supportive when I decided to study law rather than business administration, like every other Lawson for 3 generations. "Follow your heart, Abigail," he'd said at my law school graduation. "The company will always be there, but your passion is what matters." My parents had been furious, seeing it as a rejection of our family legacy. Heather, meanwhile, had done everything right in their eyes. Business degree from an Ivy League university, internships at all the right companies, and a seemingly tireless dedication to learning every aspect of Lawson Enterprises. What my parents didn't know was how often Heather complained about it all to me in private. "I hate this stupid company," she'd confessed one night after too many glasses of wine. "But it's the only way to get what's coming to me." Now, as we drove to the lawyer's office, Heather sat unnaturally straight in the back seat beside me, her face composed into a mask of grief that didn't quite reach her eyes. I noticed her checking her reflection in her compact mirror and practicing a teary expression. The law office of Gregory Powell was housed in a stately building downtown. Mr. Powell had been Grandpa's attorney and friend for over 30 years. He greeted us in the lobby, his handshake firm, but his eyes concerned as they met mine. "Abigail," he said warmly. "Harold spoke of you often. My deepest condolences." He nodded more formally to my parents and Heather before leading us to a conference room with a large oak table. Several other people were already seated: Stanley, Grandpa's longtime assistant, Amanda, his secretary, and a couple of business associates I recognized from company events. Mr. Powell cleared his throat and began reading the formal language of the will. I barely listened until I heard my name. "To my granddaughter Abigail Marie Lawson, I leave the sum of $10 million. My controlling shares in Lawson Enterprises and my personal residence at 1435 Maple Drive, including all contents therein." The room went completely silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This couldn't be right. Heather was supposed to inherit the company. That had always been the plan. Mr. Powell continued reading, but his words were drowned out by the blood rushing in my ears. I finally looked up to see my sister's face contorted with rage, my mother's hand gripping the table so hard her knuckles were white, and my father's normally ruddy complexion drained of all color. When the reading concluded, Mr. Powell read a personal note from Grandpa. Hey su dung no con goen, chow gai qua ta. Ong tin chow. Use it wisely, my granddaughter. I trust you. Nobody spoke on the drive home. Heather texted furiously on her phone, likely to her boyfriend Marcus. When we arrived, she grabbed her purse and announced she was going out. Not now, Heather, my father said sharply. We need to discuss this as a family. What's there to discuss? She snapped. Apparently I've wasted the last 6 years of my life for nothing. She slammed the door behind her, leaving me alone with my parents in the suddenly too small living room. Sit down, Abigail. My father said, his voice unnervingly calm as he gestured to the armchair across from the sofa where he and my mother perched like vultures ready to descend. I think there's been a terrible mistake, my mother began, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. Your grandfather was not in his right mind toward the end. You know that. I didn't know that. In fact, Grandpa had been sharp as ever the last time I'd visited him in the hospital, discussing a Supreme Court case with me and offering insights that even my constitutional law professor would have envied. He seemed fine to me, I said carefully. Well, you're not a doctor. My father snapped. The point is, this will cannot stand. Heather has been groomed to take over the company since she was in diapers. You're a junior associate at a law firm with zero business experience. I didn't ask for this, I protested. But you won't refuse it either, will you? My mother's voice had taken on a bitter edge I'd never heard before. The conversation went nowhere. My parents insisted I should do the right thing and sign over the company shares to Heather while keeping some reasonable portion of the money. When I wouldn't immediately agree, they abruptly ended the discussion, saying we would talk again when I'd come to my senses. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I heard hushed voices downstairs. Carefully, I crept to the top of the stairs. She's always been stubborn, my mother was saying. Just like Harold. We need to move quickly, my father replied. Before she has time to speak with the board or make any changes, I told you we should have pushed harder to have him declared incompetent before he died. This was Heather's voice, which surprised me. I hadn't heard her come home. That's enough, my father hissed. What's done is done. Now we need to focus on undoing this mess. I've already called Charles. Charles Bennett was my father's attorney, a shark in an expensive suit who had gotten the company out of several questionable situations over the years. I retreated to my room, my mind racing. The next morning, I woke early and went to my father's home office. I knew I shouldn't, but I needed to understand what they were planning. His computer was locked, but he'd never been creative with passwords. I tried his birthday, then mine. Nothing. Then I tried Heather's birthday. The screen unlocked. His email was open, and at the top was a message to Charles Bennett with the subject line, contesting the will. I clicked on it, my heart pounding. Charles, as discussed, we need to move forward with proving Abigail lacks the capacity to manage this inheritance. I've attached the files we discussed, including her history of anxiety from college. Harold's personal physician has agreed to provide a statement about the medication he was taking that might have affected his judgment. Let me know what else you need. This needs to be filed by Friday. Anxiety from college? I had gone to the campus counselor exactly twice during finals my sophomore year. How could they possibly twist that into something sinister? I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly closed the email, erased the browser history, and slipped out of the office. I needed somewhere to think, somewhere safe. I went to the one place no one would look for me, Grandpa's study in the main house. I still had the key he'd given me years ago, telling me I was always welcome no matter what. The study was exactly as he'd left it, books lining the walls, the grand piano in the corner, his reading glasses still on the desk beside a half-completed crossword puzzle. I sat in his leather chair, breathing in the lingering scent of his pipe tobacco, and tried to make sense of everything. Why had he left me the company when he knew it would cause such chaos? He wasn't cruel or capricious. He must have had a reason. As I sat thinking, my eyes fell on the small painting of a sailboat that hung beside the fireplace. It had always seemed slightly crooked, no matter how many times Grandpa adjusted it. On impulse, I stood and lifted it from the wall. Behind it was a small wall safe I'd never known existed. My hands shook as I tried to think of the combination. His birthday? No. Mine? No. Then I remembered the piece he always asked me to play on the piano, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The opus number was 27, and it was his 14th composition. I tried 2714. The safe clicked open. Inside were folders of documents, an external hard drive, and an envelope with my name written in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. I opened it first. My dearest Abigail, if you're reading this, then I am gone. And you have discovered that I've left you more than you expected. You are also likely facing resistance from your father and sister. I did not make this decision lightly. For years, I have watched Thomas mismanage funds and engage in questionable practices that go against everything I built this company to stand for. I have evidence of all of this, which you will find on the hard drive and in these documents. Karen, I'm afraid, has been complicit, and Heather has shown herself willing to go to troubling lengths to secure her position. I have left everything to you not to cause pain, but because you are the only one I trust to do what is right. You have integrity, intelligence, and compassion, 3 qualities a true leader needs. If you are reading this, it means they have already begun to move against you. Be careful, be smart, and remember that I believed in you. With love and faith. Grandpa. With shaking hands, I began going through the documents. What I found stunned me. Evidence of my father systematically embezzling from the company for years, backdated documents, falsified board minutes, and proof of offshore accounts holding millions in diverted funds. There were also emails between my mother and Richard Sophia, one of our biggest investors, revealing both a long-standing affair and her knowledge of the financial improprieties. Most shocking were the documents showing Heather had twice forged Grandpa's signature on company documents, once to authorize a failed project she had championed and once to increase her own salary when she thought no one was looking. I copied everything onto my personal USB drive and sent myself an encrypted email with the most important documents attached. Then I sent a brief message to my law school friend Jessica, asking if I could come by later to discuss something important. As I was replacing the documents in the safe, I heard the study door open. I turned to find my father, mother, and Heather staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to fury. "What are you doing in here?" my father demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. "I asked you a question, Abigail." My father's voice had dropped to the dangerous whisper I remembered from childhood, the one that preceded his worst anger. "What are you doing in your grandfather's private study?" I stood up slowly, trying to block their view of the open safe while slipping the USB drive into my pocket. "Just trying to feel close to him," I said, hating the tremor in my voice. "I miss him." "And that required going through his personal belongings?" My mother stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she spotted the safe. "What is that? What have you been looking at?" "Nothing," I said too quickly. "Just some old photos." Heather pushed past our parents, her face twisted with suspicion. "She's lying. Look, the safe is open." "What did you take, Abigail?" My father crossed the room in 3 long strides, roughly shoving me aside to examine the safe's contents. He pulled out the folders, flipping through them with increasing agitation. "Where is the rest?" he demanded. "Where's the hard drive that was in here?" I hadn't taken it, but his question confirmed my worst fears. He knew exactly what had been in that safe, which meant he knew exactly what evidence existed against him. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to edge toward the door. "Stop lying," my mother shouted, her composure finally cracking. "You've always been like this, always sneaking around, always thinking you're better than everyone else because Harold favored you." "He favored me because I wasn't trying to steal from him," I shot back before I could stop myself. The room went deadly silent. My father's face drained of color, then flooded crimson. What exactly are you implying? He asked, each word precisely enunciated. I knew I should back down, make an excuse, but something in me snapped. Years of feeling like an outsider in my own family, of watching them scheme and manipulate while I tried to play by the rules, of being made to feel wrong for having different values, all came boiling to the surface. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. I know about the embezzlement, Dad. I know about Mom's affair with Richard. I know Heather forged Grandpa's signature. I know everything. The look that passed between my parents sent a chill down my spine. You ungrateful little brat, my mother hissed. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked. Besides make me feel like I was never good enough because I wanted to be a lawyer instead of joining the precious family business? A business, by the way, that Dad has been systematically looting for years. That's enough. My father slammed his hand down on the desk. You will not speak to your mother that way. You know nothing about running a business or what it takes to keep this family's legacy intact. Intact? I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call stealing millions and hiding it offshore? Is that what you call lying to the board and the shareholders? We've worked too hard to let you ruin everything now, Heather said, stepping closer. Do you really think you can run a company? You're a junior associate who hasn't even made partner yet. You'd run everything into the ground within months, and you know it. That's not your concern anymore, I replied. Grandpa left the company to me, not you. A mistake we're going to rectify, my father said coldly. Charles is already preparing the paperwork. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Abigail. Sign over the company to Heather, keep $1 million for yourself, and we'll forget this unfortunate incident. And if I refuse? Then we'll sue you for defamation. Have you declared mentally unfit to manage the inheritance and make sure everyone knows what a vindictive, unstable person you really are? Your legal career will be over before it's properly begun. I looked from face to face, searching for any sign of the family I thought I'd had. There was nothing there but cold determination and barely contained rage. I won't sign anything, I said finally. Grandpa trusted me with his company for a reason, and I won't betray that trust. My father's expression hardened. Then you leave us no choice. You are no longer welcome in this house. Pack your things and get out. Thomas, my mother began, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. No, Karen. She's made her choice. Now she can live with the consequences. You can't be serious, I said, shock momentarily replacing anger. You're throwing me out because I won't let you steal Grandpa's company. We're throwing you out because you've betrayed this family. Heather said smugly. You have 1 hour to pack your essentials. Anything you leave behind becomes property of the estate. I stood frozen, unable to believe this was happening. Then survival instinct kicked in. I needed to get my important documents, my computer, and enough clothes to get by until I figured out my next move. And most importantly, I needed to secure that USB drive with the evidence. I brushed past them and hurried to my bedroom, pulling out a suitcase and beginning to throw in clothes, my laptop, my passport, and other essentials. I was just zipping up the bag when my mother appeared in the doorway. Hand over that bag, she demanded. You're not taking anything from this house. These are my personal belongings, I protested. Things I bought with my own money. Everything in this house belongs to the family, she insisted, stepping forward to grab the suitcase. And you're no longer part of this family. We struggled over the bag, my mother's manicured nails digging into my wrist as she tried to pry it from my grasp. The commotion brought my father and Heather running. What's going on here? My father demanded. She's trying to steal family property, my mother said, still pulling at the suitcase. It's my clothes and my laptop, I shouted, finally losing my temper completely. Things I bought with my own salary. Let go of the bag, Abigail, my father ordered. When I refused, his face darkened. I said, let go. In one swift motion, he grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked me away from the suitcase. Pain shot through my scalp as he began dragging me toward the stairs. Dad, stop. You're hurting me, I cried out, tears springing to my eyes. He ignored my pleas, pulling me down the stairs by my hair while my mother and Heather followed with matching expressions of cold satisfaction. At the front door, he finally released me, shoving me roughly onto the porch. "Your grandfather spoiled you rotten," he spat. "Made you think you were special, better than the rest of us. Well, now you'll learn what the real world is like without his protection." My mother tossed a small purse at my feet. "Your wallet and phone. That's all you've earned." They were about to close the door when I found my voice again. "You won't get away with this," I said. My voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. "What you're doing is illegal, and you will regret it. I promise you that." Empty threats from a naive little girl. Heather scoffed from behind our parents. As the door slammed in my face, I stood there in the gathering dusk, rain beginning to fall around me, staring at the house that had never really been my home. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down completely. With shaking hands, I picked up my purse, checked that the USB drive was still safely in my pocket, and walked away without looking back. The rain soaked through my thin blouse as I walked away from the house, each step putting distance between me and the family that had just disowned me. I had nowhere to go, limited cash, and only the clothes on my back, but I had something far more valuable: the truth. I called Jessica from a coffee shop several blocks away, trying to keep my voice steady as I asked if I could come over. "Abigail? Are you okay?" "You sound terrible," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Not really," I admitted. "I need a place to stay tonight. It's complicated." "Of course. Come over right away. I'll text you my address." Jessica had been my closest friend in law school, a brilliant student with a specialty in corporate law who had graduated a year ahead of me. She now worked at a prestigious firm downtown and lived in a sleek apartment building that seemed impossibly luxurious to me as I stood dripping in the lobby. When she opened her door, her eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God, Abigail, what happened to you?" I caught a glimpse of myself in her hallway mirror and understood her reaction. My hair was a tangled mess where my father had grabbed it, my clothes were soaked through, and my eyes were red and swollen from crying. "My family happened," I said simply, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up with me. Jessica ushered me inside, immediately providing dry clothes, a hot cup of tea, and an attentive ear as I recounted everything that had transpired since the will reading. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge. Just listened with growing concern until I finished by showing her the contents of the USB drive. "This is, well, explosive is an understatement," she said finally, scrolling through the documents on her laptop. "Your father could face criminal charges for this level of embezzlement. And these emails between your mother and Richard Sophia, plus Heather's forgeries. Abigail, this is serious leverage." "I know," I said, "but I don't know what to do with it. They're going to contest the will, claim I'm mentally unstable, and try to take everything Grandpa left me." Jessica was quiet for a moment, then closed the laptop decisively. "You need William. William Harrington. He was my mentor. Retired now, but still the best estates and trusts attorney in the state. If anyone can help you navigate this mess, it's him." The next morning, looking marginally more presentable in borrowed clothes, I sat across from William Harrington in his home office. At 73, he had the sharp eyes of a man half his age and a reputation for never backing down from a fight. "So," he said after I'd told him everything, "your grandfather left you controlling interest in a company worth hundreds of millions, and your family responded by physically assaulting you and throwing you out of the house. Is that about right?" "Yes, sir," I nodded. "And you have documentary evidence of extensive financial fraud by your father, an inappropriate relationship between your mother and a major investor, and forgery by your sister. All on this drive," I confirmed. William leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Miss Lawson, I've been practicing law for nearly 50 years. And I've seen some nasty inheritance disputes, but this is exceptional." My heart sank. "So you don't think I can win?" A slow smile spread across his face. "On the contrary, I think your family has made a series of catastrophic mistakes, starting with underestimating you. I'd be honored to represent you. Over the next few hours, William outlined a comprehensive legal strategy. First, we would secure my inheritance by filing for immediate enforcement of the will's provisions. Second, we would prepare counterarguments against any claims of mental incapacity, both for me and my grandfather. Third, we would use the evidence of financial impropriety as leverage if necessary. But we won't lead with the accusations against your father, William advised. That's our nuclear option. First, let's see what they do. After leaving William's office with a plan in place, I met with my friend Emily, a journalist who had graduated with me from undergrad. Without revealing all the details, I explained that I might soon be involved in a high-profile legal battle and needed advice on handling the media if it came to that. The key is controlling the narrative, Emily explained over lunch. Your family has connections and resources. They'll try to paint you as the villain, the ungrateful daughter who couldn't hack it in the business world. You need to be prepared. With legal and media strategies in development, I turned to my immediate practical needs. Using some of the cash I had on hand, I rented a small furnished apartment on a month-to-month lease, bought essential clothes and toiletries, and began to establish my new life. That evening, as I was setting up my new laptop, a text message arrived from an unknown number. Hope you're enjoying being homeless. Don't get too comfortable. When we're done, you'll have nothing. Not even your precious law career. Heather had always been vindictive, but this level of malice surprised even me. I forwarded the message to William, who advised me to save it as evidence of harassment, but not to respond. The next day, William called with news. Your family has filed their petition contesting the will. As expected, they're claiming your grandfather lacked testamentary capacity due to medication and that you exerted undue influence over him. That's ridiculous, I protested. Grandpa was sharp as a tack until the end. Of course it is, William agreed. But they've also added some concerning allegations. They're claiming you have a history of mental instability, citing your visits to a college counselor. They've also alleged you once took money from your father's wallet without permission. I remembered the incident they were referencing. I'd been 16, needed bus fare to get home from a study group, and had left a note explaining I'd taken $5. The fact that they would twist something so innocent into an accusation of theft showed how far they were willing to go. There's more, William continued. They've frozen the company accounts using an emergency court order, claiming they need to protect assets from potential mismanagement. Can they do that? I asked, alarmed. Temporarily, yes. But it works both ways. I've filed for an injunction preventing any major company decisions until the will dispute is resolved. Your father won't be able to make any significant changes without court approval. I spent the rest of the day gathering documents to support my case. Academic transcripts showing my excellent performance reviews from my law firm, even letters from professors attesting to my character and stability. If they wanted to attack my mental fitness, I would be prepared. As I worked, I realized something important. I didn't just want to defend myself. I wanted to take back what was rightfully mine and expose the truth about my family's actions. This wasn't just about money or even the company anymore. This was about justice. And about honoring my grandfather's final wishes. With renewed determination, I called William. I don't want to just respond to their attacks, I told him. I want to go on the offensive. Let's use everything we have. Are you sure? He asked cautiously. Once we release this information, there's no going back. Your family relationships may never recover. I thought about my father dragging me by my hair, my mother's cold dismissal, Heather's smug satisfaction as I was thrown out of my home. What relationships? I replied. They showed me exactly how they feel. Now it's my turn. A week into my legal battle, I received an unexpected call from Stanley, my grandfather's longtime assistant. Miss Abigail, he said. His voice hushed as though afraid of being overheard. I need to speak with you in person. It's about your grandfather. We agreed to meet at a small cafe far from both the company offices and any places my family might frequent. Stanley arrived looking nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder as he slid into the booth across from me. "Thank you for meeting me," he began, his hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I wanted to reach out sooner, but I needed to be careful. Your father has been monitoring communications at the office. What did you want to tell me about Grandpa?" I asked. Stanley leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Your grandfather knew this might happen. The conflict with your family, I mean. He was preparing for it for years." "What do you mean?" "Harold wasn't just a successful businessman. He was meticulous and forward-thinking. About 5 years ago, he began to notice discrepancies in the company finances. Small things at first, easily explained away, but he was suspicious. Instead of confronting your father immediately, he began gathering evidence." My heart raced. "The documents in the safe?" Stanley nodded. "Those were just copies. There's more, much more. Harold installed a sophisticated security system throughout the main house, including hidden cameras and microphones in his study, the living room, and the company's conference room." I sat back, stunned. Grandpa was spying on the family? He preferred to think of it as protecting his legacy. Stanley reached into his jacket and withdrew a small envelope. "This is for you. It contains the access information for a secure server where all the recordings are stored. There are years of footage, including conversations between your father and Heather about their plans for the company after Harold's death." I took the envelope with trembling hands. "Why are you giving me this?" Stanley's expression softened. "Because Harold trusted you, and so do I. I worked with him for 35 years. That company was his life's work, and he built it on principles of integrity and fair dealing. What your father has been doing goes against everything Harold stood for." After parting ways with Stanley, I immediately called Andrew, a tech specialist friend from college who now ran his own cybersecurity firm. I explained the situation in vague terms, emphasizing the need for discretion. "This is serious stuff, Abigail," Andrew said when we met at his office later that day. "Accessing private recordings could have legal implications." "These recordings were made by my grandfather on his own property," I explained. "And I'm his legal heir." Andrew reluctantly agreed to help. Using the credentials Stanley had provided, we accessed the server containing years of audio and video recordings. What we found was more damning than I could have imagined. There was footage of my father in the study on the phone with offshore bankers, explicitly discussing how to hide funds from the company's books. There were recordings of meetings where Heather suggested cutting corners on product safety to increase margins. Most shocking was a video from just 2 weeks before Grandpa's death. In it, my parents and Heather sat in the living room, unaware they were being recorded. "Once Harold is gone, we'll need to move quickly," my father was saying. "The will gives everything to Abigail, but we can contest it on grounds of undue influence." "What if that doesn't work?" Heather asked. "She's not stupid. She'll fight back." "Then we discredit her," my mother said coldly. "We have friends on the board. We'll claim she's unstable, unfit to run the company. No one will take her seriously." And if all else fails, my father added, we have other options. There are ways to pressure someone into giving up what they have. The implied threat sent chills down my spine. They had been planning this before Grandpa had even died, ready to destroy me if I stood in their way. Andrew made secure copies of the most incriminating recordings, encrypting them for my protection. "This is explosive material, Abigail. Be careful how you use it." With this new evidence in hand, I began building a network of support. I reached out to Amanda, Grandpa's secretary, who had always been kind to me. "I'm not surprised," she said when I explained what I'd discovered. "Your father and Heather have been making questionable decisions for years. Just last month, they tried to rush through a series of wire transfers that violated company policy. Harold stopped them. But they were furious. Amanda provided me with copies of internal memos and transaction records that further documented my father's financial misdeeds. "Many of us in the company are worried about what will happen under your father's management," she confided. He doesn't have Harold's integrity or vision. My next step was perhaps the most difficult, confronting Sophia, the woman with whom my mother had been having an affair. I arranged to meet her at her office after hours, making sure we would be alone. When I walked in, her face registered shock, then quickly composed itself into a professional mask. Abigail, this is unexpected. I heard about your situation with your family. Very unfortunate. Let's not pretend, Sophia, I said, setting my laptop on her desk and playing one of the recordings featuring her and my mother discussing both their relationship and company business they should not have been sharing. I know everything. Sophia's face drained of color. Where did you get that? That doesn't matter. What matters is that I have it. Along with emails between you and my mother discussing confidential company information. Information you then use to benefit your own investments. That's not. I never. She stammered. Save it. I cut her off. I'm not here to threaten you or expose your relationship with my mother. That's your business. What I care about is the company and the insider trading you've been engaging in. After a tense negotiation, Sophia agreed to provide a sworn statement about the confidential information she had received and how it had been used. In exchange, I promised not to make her relationship with my mother public or pursue legal action against her personally. Your mother will never forgive you for this, Sophia warned as I was leaving. My mother threw me out of my home and is trying to steal my inheritance, I replied. I think we're well past forgiveness. Over the next week, I continued gathering allies and evidence. Former employees came forward with stories of my father's abusive management style and questionable ethics. Board members who had respected my grandfather expressed concern about the direction of the company under my father's influence. Even competitors spoke of troubling business practices they had observed. Each person who supported me strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was legally mine anymore. It was about honoring my grandfather's legacy and setting right the wrongs that had been perpetrated in the name of the Lawson family. The night before our first major court hearing, William called with an update. Your father has been busy, he informed me. He's been meeting with board members, trying to secure their support. He's also been liquidating personal assets, which suggests he might be preparing for a worst-case scenario. Do you think he knows what we have? I asked. I doubt he knows the full extent, but he's smart enough to recognize he's vulnerable. Be prepared for anything tomorrow. These kinds of battles can get very ugly very quickly. As I prepared for bed that night, I looked around my small apartment. So different from the luxury I had grown up with. In just a few weeks, I had lost my family, my home, and my sense of security. But I had also found strength I never knew I possessed. Allies I could trust, and clarity about who I was and what I stood for. Tomorrow would be the first real test, and I was ready for it. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when I arrived the next morning. News of the Lawson inheritance dispute had leaked to the press, and the combination of family drama and millions of dollars made for irresistible headlines. Miss Lawson, is it true your family has disowned you? Abigail, did you manipulate your grandfather into changing his will? Any comment on allegations of your mental instability? I kept my head high and my expression neutral as William guided me through the crowd. We had anticipated this and prepared accordingly. I was dressed conservatively in a navy blue suit. My hair pulled back neatly, projecting an image of professionalism and stability that directly contradicted my family's narrative. Inside, my father, mother, and Heather were already seated with their attorney, Charles Bennett. Charles was exactly as I remembered him, expensive suit, perfectly coiffed silver hair, and the smug expression of someone accustomed to winning at all costs. My father refused to meet my eyes, staring straight ahead with jaw clenched. My mother glanced at me once, her expression a mixture of anger and something that might have been regret before quickly looking away. Only Heather stared directly at me, her gaze filled with undisguised hatred. Judge Patricia Martinez called the courtroom to order. We're here today regarding the contest of Harold Lawson's will. I understand the petitioners are claiming both lack of testamentary capacity and undue influence. Is that correct, Mr. Bennet? Charles rose smoothly. That's correct, Your Honor. We will demonstrate that Harold Lawson was taking medication that impaired his judgment in his final months, and that his granddaughter Abigail took advantage of his vulnerable state to manipulate him into changing his will dramatically at the last minute. The judge turned to William. And the response from the respondent? William stood, his voice calm and authoritative. Your Honor, we will show that Harold Lawson was of sound mind when he executed his will, that the provisions were consistent with his expressed wishes over many years, and that the petitioner's claims are not only false but malicious, part of a calculated attempt to seize control of assets rightfully bequeathed to my client. Over the next several hours, Charles presented their case. He called my father to testify about Grandpa's supposed mental decline, my mother to describe my alleged manipulation, and even produced a psychiatrist who, having never actually met my grandfather, nonetheless offered opinions about how his medication might have affected his cognition. Throughout it all, William took meticulous notes, occasionally leaning over to whisper reassurances or strategic insights. They're overplaying their hand, he murmured at one point. The judge isn't buying the psychiatric testimony. When it was our turn, William started not with me but with Grandpa's personal physician, who testified unequivocally that Harold had been mentally sharp until his final days. Did the medication Mr. Lawson was taking impair his decision-making capacity? William asked. Not at all, the doctor replied firmly. I monitored him closely. He remained fully capable of understanding his financial affairs and making reasoned decisions about them. Next came Grandpa's attorney, Gregory Powell, who described in detail the process of creating the will, including multiple discussions with Harold about his intentions. Mr. Lawson was extremely clear about his wishes, Gregory testified. The decision to leave controlling interest to his granddaughter was not sudden or impulsive. He had been considering it for at least 2 years, ever since certain financial irregularities at the company came to his attention. I could see my father shift uncomfortably at this mention of irregularities when I finally took the stand. William guided me through a careful recounting of my relationship with my grandfather, his concerns about the company's future, and the events following the will reading. And what happened when you refused to sign over your inheritance? William asked. I took a deep breath. My father physically assaulted me, dragging me by my hair down the stairs and out of the house. My mother and sister watched without intervening. They took my belongings and told me I was no longer part of the family. Charles objected immediately. Your Honor, these inflammatory allegations are irrelevant to the question of the will's validity. On the contrary, William countered. They speak directly to the petitioner's motivations and credibility. If they're willing to physically assault Ms. Lawson to get what they want, what else might they be willing to do? Judge Martinez overruled the objection, and I continued my testimony, describing the documents I had found in Grandpa's safe and the threatening text message from Heather. During cross-examination, Charles tried to portray me as calculating and resentful, suggesting I had manipulated my grandfather because I was jealous of Heather's position in the company. Isn't it true that you never showed any interest in Lawson Enterprises until the possibility of inheriting it arose? He asked. No, that's not true, I replied calmly. I chose to pursue law rather than business, but I always cared deeply about the company and its reputation. What I didn't care for was the direction it was taking under my father's influence. Charles narrowed his eyes. Are you accusing your father of mismanagement? William stood. Your Honor, we've been patient, allowing the petitioners to make their case without interruption. But if Mr. Bennet wishes to open the door to questions about Thomas Lawson's management of the company, we are more than prepared to walk through it. Something in William's tone must have alarmed Charles, because he quickly withdrew the question and ended his cross-examination. The judge called a recess, and as we filed out of the courtroom, I could feel the shift in energy. My family no longer looked confident. Instead, they huddled with Charles in urgent conversation, occasionally casting worried glances in my direction. They know we have something, I whispered to William. He nodded. I suspect Charles is advising them to settle. This isn't going well for them. When court reconvened, Charles requested a conference in the judge's chambers. After nearly an hour, they emerged, and Judge Martinez addressed the court. The parties have requested time to discuss a potential resolution. We will adjourn until tomorrow morning. Outside the courthouse, reporters again swarmed around us. No comment at this time, William told them firmly, guiding me to a waiting car. Once safely inside, he turned to me with a satisfied smile. They want to negotiate. Charles has asked for a meeting this evening. What does that mean? I asked. It means they're scared. They know they're losing and they want to cut their losses before things get worse. The question is, what are you willing to accept? I thought about it carefully. I want what Grandpa intended me to have, control of the company and the inheritance. But I'm also willing to be fair. Heather has worked for the company for years. She deserves something for that. And despite everything, they are still my parents. The negotiation took place in William's office that evening. My father, mother, and Heather sat stiffly on one side of the conference table, Charles beside them. I sat opposite with William and Jessica, whom I had asked to join us for additional legal perspective. Charles spoke first. We believe it would be in everyone's best interest to resolve this matter privately without further litigation. My clients are prepared to withdraw their petition contesting the will in exchange for certain considerations. What considerations? William asked. A significant financial settlement for Heather, who has dedicated her career to Lawson Enterprises, a guaranteed position for Thomas as a consultant to the company, and a complete mutual non-disparagement agreement. I leaned forward. Before we discuss terms, I want to be clear about something. I have evidence of serious financial improprieties at Lawson Enterprises, including embezzlement, falsified documents, and insider trading. I'm willing to keep that evidence private as part of a settlement, but only if I receive a full acknowledgement of my inheritance rights and a public apology for the way I was treated. My father's face flushed with anger. You're bluffing. You don't have anything. In response, I nodded to Jessica, who opened her laptop and played one of the recordings from Grandpa's hidden security system. The color drained from my father's face as he heard his own voice discussing offshore accounts where he had hidden company funds. That's illegal, he sputtered. You can't record people without their knowledge. Actually, William interjected, Harold Lawson was well within his rights to install security systems on his own property. And as his heir, Abigail has legal access to those recordings. We have hours of similar recordings, I added, plus documentation of financial transactions, forged signatures, and the threatening text messages sent after I was thrown out of my home. If this goes back to court, all of it becomes public record. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. My father and Charles conferred in hushed tones while my mother stared at the table, her composure finally cracking. Only Heather continued to glare at me defiantly. After several tense minutes, Charles cleared his throat. My clients are prepared to accept your terms, with some modifications. The negotiation lasted late into the night, but in the end, we reached an agreement. I would retain full ownership of my inheritance and control of the company. Heather would receive a fair financial settlement and could remain with the company in a non-executive role if she chose. My parents would receive a modest annual stipend but would have no role in company operations or governance. All parties would sign non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements. Most importantly for me, they would issue a public statement acknowledging the validity of Grandpa's will and apologizing for the unfortunate family misunderstanding that had followed. As they prepared to leave, my mother paused beside my chair. I never wanted it to come to this, she said quietly. Neither did I replied. But you made your choice when you stood by and watched Dad drag me out of the house. She had no response to that, merely nodding slightly before following my father and Heather out. With the legal battle behind me, I turned my attention to Lawson Enterprises. The company had suffered during the dispute, with stock prices dropping and key employees leaving amid the uncertainty. My first act as majority owner was to call a company-wide meeting. Standing at the podium in the main conference room, Facing hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depended on the decisions I would make, I felt the weight of my grandfather's trust. Many of you knew my grandfather, I began. You know he built this company on principles of integrity, innovation, and respect. In recent years, we've strayed from those principles. Today, we begin the process of returning to them. I announced a series of changes, a full audit of company finances, a new ethics policy with clear reporting procedures, and a commitment to transparency with shareholders and employees alike. I introduced a new executive team, combining experienced managers who had my grandfather's trust with fresh talent bringing new perspectives. The transition wasn't smooth. Some board members resigned in protest. Several clients, longtime friends of my father, took their business elsewhere. Heather, despite the settlement, launched a whisper campaign suggesting I was dismantling my grandfather's legacy. But for every setback, there were victories. The audit uncovered and corrected financial irregularities, strengthening our position with regulators and investors. Talented employees who had left under my father's management returned, bringing energy and ideas. New clients, attracted by our renewed commitment to ethical business practices, more than replaced those we lost. 6 months after taking control, I stood on the trading floor watching our stock price reach a new high following the announcement of quarterly results that exceeded all expectations. Stanley appeared at my elbow, a rare smile on his usually solemn face. Harold would be proud, he said simply. Looking around at the company my grandfather had built and entrusted to me, I finally felt the weight of the past months begin to lift. The betrayal still hurt, the memories of that rainy night on the porch still haunted me, but I had proven myself worthy of my grandfather's faith. And in doing so, I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. 1 year after the day my family threw me out of my home, I stood in my office at Lawson Enterprises, looking out over the city. The company had not only recovered from the turmoil of the inheritance dispute but was thriving. With our stock price at an all-time high and employee satisfaction scores better than they had been in decades, my personal life had undergone equally dramatic changes. I had moved from the small emergency apartment into a comfortable condo downtown, close enough to walk to work on nice days. I had formed new friendships and strengthened old ones, creating a network of support that felt more like family than my actual relatives ever had. Most surprisingly, I had started dating Michael, a professor of literature I'd met at a charity event. Unlike previous men I'd dated, who had been either intimidated by or overly interested in my wealth and position, Michael seemed genuinely indifferent to it. He cared about my thoughts, my dreams, my happiness, not my bank account or company title. You seem different when you're with him, Jessica observed over lunch one day. More relaxed, more yourself. She was right. With Michael, I could just be Abigail, not the Lawson heiress or the company CEO. It was a freedom I hadn't experienced since before the inheritance changed everything. As for my actual family, they had scattered like leaves in the wind. My parents had divorced 6 months after the settlement, each blaming the other for the loss of the company and fortune. My father had moved to Florida, where he was reportedly trying to start a new business venture with limited success. My mother had relocated to Arizona, living off her settlement and rarely contacting anyone from her previous life. Heather had struggled the most with our new reality. After initially refusing the position I'd offered her at Lawson Enterprises, she had tried to launch a competing business, only to find that her reputation for cutting corners and questionable ethics had preceded her. The venture failed within months. Last week, I had received an email from her, the first direct communication since the court case. It was brief, but struck a different tone than I had expected. Abigail, I've spent a year hating you for taking what I thought should be mine. It's exhausting, and it hasn't gotten me anywhere. I'm not ready to say you were right about everything, but I recognize now that Grandpa made his choice for reasons that made sense to him. I'm trying to build something new on my own terms. I hope someday we might talk again. Heather. I hadn't responded yet, unsure if it was a genuine olive branch or another manipulation. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. But I kept the email, a reminder that even the deepest wounds can begin to heal with time. The most difficult part of my journey had been the emotional aftermath. For months after the confrontation, I had nightmares about being dragged down the stairs, about standing in the rain with nowhere to go. I would wake up panicking, convinced I was about to lose everything again. On William's recommendation, I had started seeing Dr. Lauren, a therapist specializing in family trauma. Our weekly sessions had become a lifeline, helping me process not just the dramatic final betrayal, but the years of subtle undermining and emotional neglect that had preceded it. Family relationships are complicated, Dr. Lauren had told me in one of our early sessions. We're conditioned to forgive family members for behavior we would never accept from friends or colleagues. Learning to set boundaries is essential for your healing. With her guidance, I had begun to understand that my worth wasn't defined by my family's approval or by the inheritance itself. It came from within, from the values I chose to uphold and the way I treated others. This realization had led me to establish the Harold Lawson Foundation, using a portion of my inheritance to fund educational opportunities for underprivileged students interested in business and law. The foundation had become my passion project, a way to honor my grandfather's legacy while creating something positive from the painful experience. "You've turned poison into medicine," Stanley had commented when I shared the foundation's first annual report with him. "Harold always said you had that gift, the ability to find opportunity in adversity." I had often wondered what Grandpa would think of how everything had unfolded. Had he anticipated the level of betrayal from his own son? Had he known how ugly things would get? I liked to think he had faith that I would find my way through, that his trust in me hadn't been misplaced. 6 months ago, I had made the difficult decision to reach out to my parents individually. Not to reconcile, necessarily, but to achieve some kind of closure. My father had declined to meet, sending a terse message through his assistant that he had nothing to discuss. My mother had agreed to coffee at a neutral location, a conversation that had been stilted and uncomfortable, but at least civil. I made mistakes, she had admitted toward the end of our meeting. I chose sides when I should have stood up for what was right. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Abigail. I just want you to know that I recognize what I did. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was more acknowledgement than I had expected." We had parted with a handshake, not a hug, both understanding that while the worst of the hostility might be behind us, a true mother-daughter relationship might never be possible again. As I reflected on the tumultuous year, I realized that the inheritance had been both a curse and a blessing. It had cost me my family, but had also freed me from toxic relationships and shown me my own strength. It had burdened me with enormous responsibility, but had also given me the platform to make a positive difference in ways I had never imagined possible. The money itself. The $10 million that had seemed so important at the beginning now felt almost incidental. What mattered was what I had learned, that I could survive being cast out, that I could rebuild from nothing, that I could stand firm in my principles even when it cost me dearly. My grandfather's final gift hadn't been the money or even the company. It had been the opportunity to discover who I truly was when everything else was stripped away. That night, I hosted a small dinner party at my condo for the people who had supported me through the darkest times: Jessica and William, who had fought beside me in court, Stanley and Amanda, who had risked their positions to provide crucial evidence, Emily, who had helped me navigate the media attention, Andrew, who had secured the damning recordings, and Michael, who had shown me that I could be loved for myself, not my name or fortune. As we raised our glasses in a toast, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since before my grandfather's death. This was my real family now, the one I had chosen and who had chosen me in return. To Harold, William proposed, who knew his granddaughter better than she knew herself. And to new beginnings, I added, built from the ruins of what we thought we needed. Later, after everyone had gone home, and I stood alone on my balcony, looking at the stars, I thought about the scared, hurt woman who had stood in the rain a year ago, watching her family shut the door on her. I wished I could tell her that the pain would not break her, that the betrayal would not define her. That she would build something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. In the end, the most valuable inheritance wasn't the money or the company or even the evidence that had saved me. It was the discovery that I could stand alone if necessary, that I could rebuild what others had tried to destroy, and that I could choose compassion over vengeance even when justice was firmly on my side. That was the legacy I would carry forward, far more precious than any fortune. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone you trusted betrayed you? What helped you find strength in that difficult time? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too can rise from the ashes of betrayal. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember, your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it.